Welcome to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. Each week we talk about heart rate variability and how it can be used to improve your overall health and wellness. Please consider the information in this podcast for your informational use and not medical advice. Please see your medical provider to apply any of the strategies outlined in this episode. Heart Rate Variability Podcast is a production of Optimal LLC and Optimal HRV. Check us out at optimalhrv.com. Please enjoy the show. Welcome to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. I am Matt, here to just do a quick introduction of Chapter 6 in our series on the heartbeat of business. So if you're just joining us, I highly encourage you to go back to episode 1 of the series. We are publishing the audiobook chapters of the book and then talking about them each week. So love for you to start the journey with us instead of jumping in midstream. But for those that have been along the journey, Chapter 6 is kind of another inflection point in the journey. We start to talk about the leader's role as a key job resource, mostly as a social support, which is, I believe, really often missed. It's good to think about, and sometimes easier to think about resources as HR benefits or other things we give, whether that's financial, whether that's a benefit, those sort of things. But really we dive into the idea, especially when we're talking about the stress response, especially when we're talking about heart rate variability and the connection to cognitive performance, about the real power of social support. To me, it's that leader's relationship with those that they supervise really sets a huge part of the culture in which everybody works, and then where consumers, customers, patients, whatever people are interacting with it, what those folks feel as well. You can think about that as the climate people feel, but this is where the leader really sets and positions themselves as a key resource. We'll also talk about if that doesn't happen and the leader is a key source of stress, that in many ways the game is already lost. So I will be quiet now. We'll set up this chapter and then we'll be back next week to discuss. Thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy this chapter.
Chapter 6: Job Resources and Leadership. The JDR model provides leaders and businesses with a research-based and straightforward understanding of the connection between distress, burnout, and outcomes. It also puts forth a challenge. How do leaders and businesses position job resources to offset the distress from job demands and promote engagement? When distress from job demands is greater than job resources, people are at risk for burnout and a decline in performance. When job resources adequately address the distress from job demands, people possess the capacity for engagement and realizing their performance potential. In the previous chapter, we presented HRV biofeedback training and mindfulness practice as key job resources that a business can provide for their people to improve resiliency. In this chapter, we introduce the concept of the leader as a crucial job resource. Leaders are a wild card when it comes to the JDR model. In too many circumstances, ineffective leaders create unhealthy psychological and social job demands. Instead of eliciting motivation and engagement, poor leaders become a tremendous source of distress and burnout for their people. Those unfortunate enough to work for terrible leaders know that the distress caused by their leader far eclipses all other sources of work distress. In high-performing businesses, a supportive and invested leader becomes the primary job resource. These leaders help their people manage job demands while pushing them to excel. People's perspective of their leader as either primarily a job demand and a cause of distress, or alternatively, as a supportive job resource has tremendous consequences for business outcomes. Unfortunately, there is an epidemic of bad leadership in modern business. 75% report that their boss is the most stressful part of their job. 27% were bullied by their boss. 24% would fire their boss. The worst part of the day equals time spent with boss. Those who work for bad bosses have a 39% higher chance of having a severe heart problem. Leaders and the cultures they help create need to be a job resource that promotes resiliency and not the worst part of someone's job. It does not mean that great leaders are not a cause of stress from time to time, especially when they ensure their people meet the shared expectations of their jobs. The challenge for leaders is to approach their role as more of a support and resource than as a source of constant distress. In this chapter, we will explore the biological and psychological reasons behind this argument. Emotional symmetry. Emotions are contagious. People mirror the emotions of the people with whom they interact. Leaders' emotional states are highly infectious due to the power they hold over people's work success and income. A leader's emotional states and behaviors will impact the motivation and emotional health of the people they lead. The human brain evolved to survive the savannas of Africa. Compared to other predators, humans were weak and slow creatures. Humans did develop a few great advantages when it came to cooperation and teamwork. Early humans who worked well with others survived and eventually dominated their environment. There was a simple equation for survival for most of human history. An isolated individual would likely die. In a community, the person often had food, shelter, and safety. In the past, as is the case today, the best way to incorporate oneself into a group was to adapt the group's emotional state and accepted behaviors. This innate ability is called emotional symmetry. Those who struggle to adapt are vulnerable to exclusion and can be ostracized by the group. Studies of social exclusion demonstrate an increase in the sympathetic anxiety response and dorsal vagal shutdown response, both negatively affecting HRV. Emotional symmetry is why the leader's emotional states and relationships are so crucial to a healthy and high-performing business culture. Organizational or team culture comprises a set of beliefs, expectations, and values that guide behavior and decision-making. In many ways, culture is how it feels to be a part of a team or business. It is not only the people in the culture who experience the collective emotional state. Customers and partners who interact with those in the culture will also feel it. Climate is how people experience the team or business, including the physical space, the processes, and the business's people. A healthy leader with a high HRV will likely supervise an emotionally healthy culture with a collectively high HRV. Customers will enjoy and even celebrate their experiences of this culture and its people, helping the business establish a strong brand. The inverse is also true. A burned-out leader will fail to maintain a healthy culture, and customers will become frustrated and take their business elsewhere. Emotional symmetry is a crucial variable for high-performance businesses. The leader must understand the impact of their emotional state on the mental health of their people and their culture. Emotional symmetry is also significantly impacted by the mental health and distress levels of coworkers. Let's return to the cup analogy. A burned-out coworker whose cup is overflowing will spill their distress into everyone else's cup. In the short term, coworkers can support and have compassion for someone having a tough day or week. However, the longer that people and cultures get exposed to burned-out people, the more likely the emotional distress of the struggling person will fill up the cups of those who work with them. Think of a great leader, either one who led you or someone you admire professionally. What made them a great leader? We assume that part of the answer includes the skills and talents that person brought to their leadership. We imagine that their skills are only part of your admiration for this person. Most people first think about the leader's personality and the quality of their relationship with the leader. Let's explore some relational dynamics that every leader needs to develop to be the job resource that people need to thrive in their work. Co-regulation and supportive supervision. In psychology, the term co-regulation describes how a trusted person helps others regulate their sympathetic or dorsal vagal stress response and operate from their prefrontal cortex and ventral vagus. To effectively help co-regulate someone else takes time and strategic focus on building healthy relationships. Supportive supervision is a strategy to help co-regulate distress, prevent burnout, support professional development, and engage people in their work. Several challenges in the modern business environment make co-regulation hard to achieve. The first challenge for leaders is to know how their people are doing. HRV dashboards like Optimal HRV provide an innovative way to track the health of individuals, teams, and businesses. Before such innovations, it was difficult to identify struggling individuals and teams at risk for burnout. For leaders not yet utilizing an HRV dashboard, the challenge is that much greater. These leaders must find other ways to assess distress levels regularly. The second challenge, which exists whether or not a leader has implemented HRV, is finding the time to support people and provide them with job resources to prevent or recover from distress and burnout. In this chapter, we will explore the characteristics of a strong leader whose connection to his team is a source of co-regulation. A healthy relationship between the leader and their people increases resiliency and engagement. Building and maintaining healthy relationships happens with dedicated time to connect with people individually and in teams. Currently, many businesses fail to provide leaders with the time and capacity to create relationships that help regulate distress, support wellness, and assist people with reaching their potential. The research presented throughout this audiobook directly challenges this traditional minimal approach to management and supervision. The health of the leadership, workforce relationship, and culture determines which parts of the nervous system are active at work and whether the leader is a supportive job resource or a source of distress. Ignoring the relational and emotional health of teams and cultures means burnout increases while performance plummets. The final challenge for businesses in creating and maintaining healthy relationships and high-performing cultures requires ensuring that leaders possess adequate communication and interpersonal skills. Most business leaders get little to no training on building trust and psychological safety with individuals and teams. Two of the authors of this audiobook hold advanced degrees in psychology. Even with all the skills we have learned through our education, we find it challenging to build trust and psychological safety in the face of intense distress. To address this challenge, let's first explore the concepts of trust and psychological safety. Then we break down some focus areas a leader can develop to co-regulate distress. Trust. Trust is the bond that holds teams and businesses together and is the foundation for outstanding performance. Many people we talked to about HRV stated that they lacked the trust in their leadership to share HRV without some sort of incentive. These statements are consistent with research findings that only 1 in 3 people report a high level of trust in their leaders. Let's talk about 2 characteristics of trust that are particularly valuable in an organization. First, trust builds when people develop confidence and respect for the character, ability, and strength of the leader. A leader should always keep the question, "Am I worthy of the people's trust?" in the front of their mind. As a warning, a burned-out leader inevitably struggles to bring the strength and character to their work necessary to build trust. Remember, the leader is the role model for their people. The second aspect of trust is people's ability to predict the quality and consistency of the leader's behavior. Distress levels increase when people cannot predict the mood and demands of their leader. Working for leaders with unpredictable emotional swings, inconsistent messages, or lack of follow-through leaves people struggling to predict what is coming next instead of focusing on excellence. Emotional symmetry with an emotionally dysregulated leader is nearly impossible, often resulting in a culture characterized by chaos. Great leaders bring a high level of consistency and discipline to the teams and businesses they lead. As mentioned in the shared expectations section earlier, and as we will explore with psychological safety next, when people know what to expect in their environment, it helps calm the anxious, sympathetic nervous system. When positioning themselves as a job resource for their people, leaders need discipline in focus and message. A leader's actions, focus, and words signal to people, "This is important." For their people, job success depends on focusing on a small set of variables. In their study of great businesses, Collins and Hansen found, no human enterprise can succeed at the highest level without consistency. If you bring no coherent unifying concept and disciplined methodology to your endeavors, you'll be whipsawed by changes in your environment and cede your fate to forces outside your control. Relationships and cultures high in trust allow people to bring the best of their prefrontal cortex and ventral vagus to their work. As trust builds, HRV increases. The strong ventral activation brings forth feelings of calm and a sense of psychological safety. As we will explore next, psychological safety is a crucial variable for business success. Psychological safety. Psychological safety is the sense that someone is physically, emotionally, and socially safe with people and their environment. Leaders must manage all these factors to elicit states that promote excellence. Psychological safety is necessary for people to make themselves vulnerable. Traditionally, vulnerability is not something celebrated in the business world. However, vulnerability occurs when people challenge established ways of thinking or doing something, bring up an innovative product idea, hold peers accountable to established norms, or engage in honest but difficult conversations. Healthy teams and businesses celebrate those people who take these sorts of risks. Besides trust, several other aspects contribute to psychological safety. Let's explore the factors of psychological safety. Physical safety is the first factor of psychological safety. Physical safety is lost when someone fears harm from accidents or jobs that might experience physical violence, such as law enforcement, construction, or healthcare. As fear and allostatic load increase, energy and focus shift to creating as much safety as possible in dangerous situations. Fear knocks the person out of their window of tolerance, leaving little capacity to focus on anything else. Next, social safety builds confidence that others will respect their psychological well-being. A sense of social safety evolves out of the knowledge that others will not put them down, gossip about them, or stab them in the back. Social safety allows people to take risks, knowing that their ideas will get heard, and people will respect them for their vulnerability. People thrive in healthy relationships where they feel valued both as a person and a professional. Being appreciated as more than a small part of a business machine elevates engagement, morale, and motivation. Finally, moral safety gives people faith that the business and its leaders will operate within its shared values and not ask them to go against their morals and ethics. We will discuss the importance of shared values in future chapters as a crucial component to engagement and ensuring ethical behavior and decisions. Violating moral safety elicits a type of stress termed moral distress. Moral distress occurs when people feel the leaders' or business's directives or actions deviate from values, expectations, morals, and ethics. The person knows the right thing to do, but business or other restraints make it impossible to pursue the right course of action. When moral distress hits a certain level of intensity and goes on for a duration of time, it results in moral injury. For many, moral injury is the traumatic response resulting from moral distress, creating allostatic overload. Unlike other traumatic experiences, like workplace violence, moral injury is more difficult for leaders to identify. Leaders usually notice the fight, flight, or freeze behaviors and might label these people as insubordinate or problematic. When leaders and businesses violate psychological safety, people will seek bonding with coworkers to find safety in numbers from leadership. This bonding often results in a team fight or flight response. Leadership might interpret the increased sympathetic response as disrespectful and divisive. In reality, it is a natural stress response. When leaders with power make people feel unsafe, one of the few ways to counteract this is to gather other frustrated people to fight against a shared enemy, a phenomenon termed trauma bonding. Human beings thrive in trusting, safe relationships and struggle in dysfunctional and chaotic ones. When trust and safety are high, HRV usually follows, as psychological safety calms the sympathetic nervous system, allowing people to bring their best cognitive, emotional, and social selves to their work. People thrive in relationships based on mutual trust and safety, which has a positive impact on everything from turnover, applicants for employment, productivity, creativity, the lifespan of the business, ability to learn, and conflict. Next, let's examine leadership traits that create a strong foundation for trust and psychological safety to grow. These traits allow the leader to turn healthy relationships into high performance. Mindfulness. Mindfulness allows a leader to recognize when their own cups are filling up and their states begin shifting from ventral vagal to sympathetic or dorsal vagal. A mindful leader provides the consistency of focus and emotional stability crucial for building trust and promoting psychological safety. When distress rises, mindfulness and emotional regulation are two of the most effective tools leaders have to tame the chaos. Co-regulation is difficult enough during good times. In a crisis, the leader's calm plays a crucial role in providing co-regulation to help people manage their sympathetic response and find the intellectual and social capacity to make it through the storm. When leaders realize that their allostatic load is reaching the edge of their window of tolerance, they have the power to choose their response and utilize the flare skills discussed in the previous chapter. Catching their increasing allostatic load allows them to implement flare to counter the distress. This insight helps avoid allostatic overload, which negatively affects the team and business culture. An HRV biofeedback and mindfulness practice helps the leader develop an easily accessible coping skill that brings a sense of calm and peace when distressed. A mindfulness practice focused on breathing helps them develop the breath as a coping skill. When the leader recognizes their cup filling with distress, they can take a focused breath and bring the peace and calm they feel when they practice breathing into that moment of growing anxiety. Over years of practice, they benefit by recognizing their shifting state and then taking a few breaths to keep emotions regulated and remain in the window of tolerance. Leaders are the role models for health and wellness for the people they manage. For a team to maximize the benefits outlined in the mindfulness and biofeedback chapter, a leader must practice these themselves and communicate their experience regularly. When a leader engages in HRV mindfulness and biofeedback training, they not only build the traits essential for trust and psychological safety, they also communicate the importance of this practice in the culture. Honesty. James Kouzes and Barry Posner have implemented a survey with millions of people worldwide since 1987. Every participant was asked the following question: what values, personal traits, or characteristics do you look for and admire in a leader? In every survey in every country over the decades, the number one thing people wanted from their leaders was honesty. Honesty is foundational to trust and psychological safety, as well as to all the leadership approaches that follow in this audiobook. One aspect of honesty is the obvious one. Leaders should not lie to their people. While obvious, it is amazing how many examples we collected over the years where leaders lied out of convenience or lack of courage. Once the lie is exposed, it destroys the leader's integrity, distress increases, and the culture suffers. As consultants, we have only witnessed a couple of cases where a leader recovers after an exposed lie, as most do not survive the fallout. In these situations, the leader and their people spent a lot of time rebuilding trust. While the time and effort taken to repair the distrust must happen, those involved had little energy to focus on performance or business outcomes during the process. The second aspect of honesty challenges the leader to confront difficult facts. In many situations where a leader gets caught in a lie, they choose to lie because they think it is easier than dealing with the problematic nature of the truth facing the business. Avoiding the short-term distress of sharing the truth leads to long-term financial, relational, and time costs necessary to repair the harm done. If people do not believe their leader will honestly disclose the business's challenges, creating the high-trust environments needed for excellent outcomes is impossible. Confronting difficult facts also requires leaders to provide honest feedback on individual and team performance. The longer the leader allows certain counterproductive behaviors to continue, the more significant the effects on team morale and outcomes. It might seem easier in the short term to avoid these uncomfortable conversations. Unfortunately, the impact of these behaviors worsens over time and often leads to more significant disciplinary and performance issues. The third aspect of honesty is open communication. Leaders get privileged information that those lower down on the organizational chart do not receive. Access to this information represents power within the business culture. No leader can or should attempt to communicate everything to their people. The tricky balance leaders need to strike is ensuring they provide the information people need to do their work and understand the health and challenges of the business while keeping people focused on their work. Informal networks account for 70% of business communication. Anywhere from 10 to 25% of the communication in these networks is inaccurate. People talk, and like the game of telephone, the more they talk, the more distorted the information is that they communicate. The challenge to the leader entails identifying what information is critical for people to do their work and for building trust, and then finding ways to communicate it effectively and efficiently. Open communication helps to counter misinformation and gossip. People are also more likely to bring rumors and misinformation to a trusted leader's attention. Once identified, the leader then strategically injects the corrected information back into the system. Humility. Modern business glorifies the celebrity leader. These leaders seem to know everything about the present, have a strategy and answer for every question, and appear to know what will happen in the future. They love and need attention, praise, and fame. Celebrity leaders rise like rockets and grace the covers of magazines, write best-selling memoirs, and star on popular television shows. The message new leaders often get from these very visible celebrities is that the leader is the most critical variable in a business's success. Unfortunately, most of these leaders fall hard and fast. Their hubris blinds them to threats and changes in the market, and they stop asking essential questions. When a crisis hits, they lack the trust needed for a collective resilient response. Many view humility as an innate trait. Someone is either humble or not. In earlier chapters, we learned that repeated states eventually develop into personality traits. The challenge is for leaders to see humility as a trait to grow and a strategy for engagement and high performance. Think of humility as a top-shelf expensive glass of whiskey. As any whiskey connoisseur will explain with great passion, you should never put ice in your whiskey, as it changes the molecular structure of the whiskey and diminishes taste. Instead of ice, a good whiskey needs a small amount of filtered water. Most whiskey gets bottled at a strength where the alcohol quickly overwhelms the taste. The water allows the complexity of the flavor profile to develop to maximum enjoyment from the dram. Humility is the water added to the whiskey. A leader's humility opens the flow of communication and knowledge up and down the organizational chart. Just as the space provided by the water allows for maximum enjoyment of the whiskey, humility enables people and teams to thrive, promoting teamwork and opening the communication necessary for trust and high performance. Humility is more than the absence of narcissism and hubris. It is the understanding that the leader is one part of a business's overall success. Great leaders understand that they do not know everything and cannot possess all the correct answers or necessary expertise. Creative and innovative solutions emerge from the group's collective knowledge, not from a single powerful individual. The more perspectives and expertise the leader elicits, the more likely it is that they have the necessary information to make an educated and correct decision. Allowing others to be part of a collaborative decision-making process also increases buy-in and the potential for the decision to be successfully implemented. Empathy and accountability. Building trust and psychological safety relies on the leader's ability to understand other people's perspectives and experiences. Healthy cultures and relationships that help people manage distress depend heavily on the leader's empathy. According to Miller and Rolnick, empathy is the ability to understand another's frame of reference and the conviction that it is worthwhile to do so. Striving for empathy shows that the leader values the person and that what they are saying is important. Empathy challenges the leader to approach a situation with curiosity and without immediately jumping to judgment. To be an effective coach, it is vital to see empathy as a worthwhile endeavor and something proven to improve HRV. Empathy is the foundation for any healthy personal or professional relationship. As the one with more power, the leader needs to make a concerted effort to understand the other person's point of view. Expressing empathy does not mean the leader will not hold the person accountable for their performance. The goal is to understand the why behind the behavior. Understanding the why helps to not only address the specific situation, but to address more significant system issues or other variables that led to the situation. Empathy helps leaders avoid a common mistake termed the accountability fallacy. According to Connors and Smith, the accountability fallacy captures a common mistake people make when they assume that others fail to follow through because there is something wrong with them. When leaders fall prey to the accountability fallacy, they not only assume that their people are flawed, but that they themselves can do little or nothing to change those flaws except punish people for having them. Real accountability always requires us to begin by looking at ourselves for anything that might be missing. In difficult situations, empathy challenges leaders to set aside their frustration and view the person as a valuable human being who is more than just the sum of their current behaviors. Confronting someone about their behaviors and shortcomings often makes the person defensive, making it more likely that the problem will occur again. Counterintuitive to many traditional approaches, behaviors rarely change when someone is confronted and lectured on why they are wrong. Instead, change occurs when that person understands the reasons behind the action and collaboratively works toward finding solutions. Empathy sets the stage for a partnership. Those following the accountability fallacy believe that if the leader enacted the right mix of rewards and punishment, change would follow. Research demonstrates that empathy and understanding are, in fact, better predictors of improved performance. When leaders create partnerships, they understand that the other person is the expert on themselves. Bringing the person into the problem-solving conversation helps them feel valued, which is a very different experience than being on the receiving end of a discussion about punishment. The truth is that the leader does not have all the answers and solutions. If that were the case, every workplace would resemble a utopia without any problems or disruptions.